people who want to uh, police hate speech are people who just hate speech.
Bold statement there from Jimmy Dore, probably one of the most interesting figures on the distant left. I'm a big fan of Jimmy. I actually just got to meet him for the first time last year, and in this video, he talks about the death of the American left and where are all the liberals is something that he asks. And he also gets into kind of the free speech issue as part of this. He was on Dad Saves America recently, so I just wanted to react. So let's take a look.
You are a comedian. You came up through sort of progressive politics. I'm like a right winger, libertarian oriented, and yet I love watching your stuff. And I feel like that combo is part of this weird political realignment that's taken place. Like I know like half your audience is probably people more like me. And, so how do you think about what's happening with the
Well,
realignment that's going on?
I'll just say this. I think that uh, Democrats and people who I considered or consider themselves liberal, the liberal class has become illiberal, right? They've abandoned what it means to be a liberal. Like I always, I sometimes make a joke in my act about, I'm for freedom of speech, I'm against censorship, I'm for bodily autonomy, I'm for, I'm pro-choice, I'm anti-war, and that makes me a right winger now.
Yeah.
That's what it's amazing, right? And the liberals are rabid censorship for censorship. They're completely pro-war, right? They've been completely hoodwinked by the propaganda about Putin and Russia, and they don't know. That's the thing about Americans. They're the most propagandized people in the world, and they have no idea, right? People in China know when they're being propagandized, right? And people in the old Soviet Union knew when they were being people in America think like, wait, I don't, well, I'm just watching the news.
That's the point. You're being propagandized because you're watching the news. I think he's right on here. When you have kind of a left-wing establishment now that, kind of totes the CIA line on every foreign conflict, talks about how we had to police hate speech, etc., it's hard to deny some of this stuff.
Even though Chomsky wrote Manufacturing Consent and, 30 years ago, they still think their consent is not being manufactured, which it is. It's amazing to me. So anyway, the realignment, I mean, look at the people there's a lot of Democrats surrounding. Trump used to consider himself a Democrat. Matt Taibbi, Elon Musk, right? I'm pretty sure he voted for Joe Biden, right? Let's see, Tulsi Gabbard was the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. So it's there definitely is, and I subscribe to what I'm more on. I know there's a lot of people who are actual lefties who are hypercritical of Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Kash Patel, and I'm like, yeah, I have big disagreements with Trump and Cash and Pam Bondi and Tulsi and RFK, but I also have lots of agreements with them, right? So I think you got to be able to, it doesn't, people are always talking about, oh, you think Elon's intentions are, with doing Doge. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what his intentions are. It only matters in politics. It only matters what the outcome is. And only, we'll know them by their fruits. Like, what did they do? It's like, I say, it didn't matter if Lincoln freed his slaves because he thought it was going to help him get laid. It didn't matter what his intention was. It mattered what the outcome was. That's all that matters. That's why they call making legislation, making sausage. And you don't want to see how it's done.
And so far, the fruits from Doge have been pretty good for dissidents, especially dismantling U.S. aid. But that's so disconnected from the Congress, which we just saw last week, passing a bloated spending bill. So I think Jimmy Dore is basically right about how he looks at this. It's like you can have whatever motives you want, but the proof's in the pudding, really, as far as how that's an outcome for net liberty.
It only matters what the outcome is. So I'm more in line with them. I know Chris Hedges, who I respect a lot, is very down on everything that's happening, and he just thinks that they're all just a criminal enterprise, and they're grifting, and they're collapsing in on themselves. And I'm like, I actually see them stopping the Ukraine war, telling Europe, you're on your own. We're not going to be there to protect you. Got, do your own thing, militarily. And that excites me. I like that they're purging the deep state. It's like they're getting rid of it's like a revolution against the neocons. That's what it feels like to me. And again, we'll have to see how it plays out. Now, his Achilles heel, and it's shared by everybody in his cabinet, is Israel Palestine. That's from my point of view. And now his solution is not a solution, but other people say, well, yeah, that's just him negotiating, doing art of the deal. He wants to move all the Palestinians out. That's just it. I'm like, okay, I don't know what the deal is he wants then, but anyway, so um, I'm excited in a lot of ways, and I think there is a realignment happening for sure. I think the fact that Donald Trump is a Republican just is kind of happenstance. You know, um, his rhetoric around immigration was shared by every Democrat since Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton used to rail against illegal immigrants, saying they come here and take our jobs and they come here and use our services. Hillary Clinton said they have to learn English, they have to pay a big fine, they have to they're all the same thing with Barack Obama. Uh,
This is why a lot of the establishment left hates Jimmy Dore, because he's willing to bring this stuff up. He remembers it. If you summate all of kind of Trump's views, he probably ends up a little bit to the left of Bill Clinton on many issues, actually. So it just shows how far the Overton window has been pushed to the side of big government. And in a way, I agree. It does kind of seem like there's at least some semblance, or the optics are a revolution against the neocons, but I don't think that's totally true, because Trump sure has stuffed his cabinet with some prominent neocons, among them Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio and Elise Stefanik. But that is kind of his agenda. His campaign pledges was to be less interventionist. Of course, he never will be for Israel, but mostly with Jimmy Dore here.
But then when Donald Trump got the nomination, I think that they had to figure out a way to separate themselves from him, right? Because, they're a party of Wall Street, the Democrats. Then they said they're not a party of workers, and they knew that. So they had to, we'll paint him as a racist, and we'll paint him as a traitor to our country. And so now all the things that they used to say about it, I mean, he's a little more bombastic about his immigration, but the message is almost exactly the same. And so that's why 45% of Hispanics voted for him. So,
And I think 54% of male has like Latinos.
oh, really?
It was like a majority of Latino men, as I understand it, which was that's kind of the first time in like since World War II probably that a Republican got a majority of like a large minority vote like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they say his numbers didn't go up with African Americans from the last time, but I think it was over 20%, which is still kind of amazing for a Republican, any Republican, and especially a guy who they painted as a racist.
Okay.
There has been a demographic shift on this, which is kind of interesting, because all we heard for the longest time was that, Trump was this racist that would, target Mexicans and, do a mass deportation. And they've talked about mass deportation a lot, especially Vivek Ramaswamy talked about that quite a bit, but it hasn't really paid out in terms of tangible policy. It's because it's too unrealistic. How could you do a mass deportation with about 35 million projected illegal immigrants in the US? It's just not really possible. So,
it's one of these things where right before you showed up, I saw there was a senator from, I think, Missouri calling Elon Musk a dick on Twitter.
Yeah,
And the thing that was so funny to me is that we just did a video about the 60 Minutes piece where Germany is now arresting people.
yeah,
For exactly that. There was actually a part
you
of
can't insult.
He was a politician who was called a Pimmel, and they went after the person that did it. And I have a feeling that same senator likes those laws. So why do you think that that's happened? Why has the political left in America like turned on free speech? That's such a strange like transformation.
Well, they just, there's an old saying, you scratch a liberal and underneath is a fascist, right? You've heard that, right? And I never really understood that, but I get it now. Especially during COVID. Like I said, they used to say I'm pro-choice. You don't hear them saying that much anymore. Now they say they're pro-abortion, which is weird. I have met some people who are pro-abortion, but it's a weird thing to be pro about. Like I'm pro-choice, but they can't say pro-choice anymore because they were for mandating the COVID vaccine, which is not, you don't get a choice.
This is so true. Nothing says the lack of bodily autonomy than forcing people to accept drug injections from a big pharma group, and that was the majority of the American left pushing for that.
Your choice is you don't have a job and you can't travel. That's your choice.
My body, my choice with an asterisk.
Yeah, that's right. And anyway, so the Democrats became authoritarian, and now it's funny, I was watching that 60 Minutes thing about Germany, and they're saying that they're trying to they're censoring speech that would create people to engage in extremism and they're right-wing extremism, right? And I'm like, well, what do you call what you're doing? What you're doing right now is putting people in prison for speech. You're putting people in prison for protesting a genocide that's happening in Gaza. You're putting people, and at the same time, you're funding literal Nazis in Ukraine. You're the extreme right. The people who consider themselves liberals and lefts, they're the extreme right. They're look at what they're doing. They're putting people. I mean, censorship is the hallmark of dictators, right? And authoritarians and fascists. And they look at it like it's the Christian thing to do. And I don't know if they'll ever see the light on that. They just think that you have to protect people, marginalized groups from hate speech. They do it. I mean, every dictator, when they censor and keep outside information, they always say, well, we're doing it for your own good. They say, oh, we have to protect minority groups and the marginalized groups, and we have hate speech. And like I said last night, people who want to police hate speech are people who just hate speech.
Yeah, I think Jimmy's totally right here. Nothing says extremism than what the quote-unquote sensible moderates have done in the American political system, especially in the last few years. You have, people supporting and driving wars throughout the world, in every corner of the world, as long as, it does the CIA's bidding or Israel's bidding. They want us to get into a war with Iran now, many people. But the American left has really been completely consumed by issues that they were once champions of. I mean, people like RFK Jr. was a lawyer who fought forever for, a cleaner environment and, safer drugs. So you get this censorship machine, and a lot of it came at the time of, when COVID broke out. And we know from the Twitter files that basically every three-letter agency under the sun worked with those social media platforms to encourage them to ban certain people and certain behaviors. And it wasn't just strictly left and right wing, although I think it was mostly in that dynamic. They used Alex Jones as a test case first for what they did during the COVID regime. But then you even saw people like Alex Berenson, who is essentially kind of more or less a centrist journalist, banned for what he said about COVID. So I think a lot of this American left died the moment that Barack Obama swore into office. They were no longer free speech, anti-war champions since that point, and never really organized the same kind of anti-war activism for sure when he swore in. So I want to hear what you guys think, though. What do you think is the factor most responsible for the death of the American left? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and our motto, as always, is no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.